So, Ed, we're talking about Keystone Policy Center, past, present, future. And really, I just have a few questions for you. But the first one is about the past. How did you get involved with Keystone Policy Center?
That's a great question. I love skiing. I was the head of the Council of Energy Resource Tribes then. And we had an office in Denver. And so on the weekends when I was there, I'd go up to the mountains and want to ski. I ran into a person, Harris Sherman, who became our volunteer counsel, by the way, later on. And he said, well, you love to ski, come up to Keystone. I know the guy who runs it, Bob Maynard. I met Bob. He gave me free lodging and free ski passes. I thought I had hit the jackpot. And in the course of getting to know Bob Maynard, he said, you got to meet Bob Craig, who came just a couple of years ago to create the Keystone Center with this new idea and bring a soul to the community. And so I met Bob. I'll never forget the first time I met him, in his jeans and his aspen buckle on his belt, a tweed jacket, a cowboy hat. I mean, bigger than life. I said, oh man, this is going to be a cool experience. And so that's the first time we met, was in a meeting together that was set up by Bob Maynard.
Wow. So at that point in time, were you able to use Keystone's framework or facilitation or areas? How did it help with the work that you were doing with the Council of Energy Resource Tribes?
You know, I don't want to take full credit for this because I had two good sidekicks. Charlie Loha, Osage Indian, former judge, great intellectual. He was involved in so many, the beginnings of so many great Indian American movements. And John Echohawk, who till this day is the head of Native American Rights Fund. So in the course of talking to Bob, I said, you know, your facilitation process may work beautifully with the Council of Energy Resource Tribes. We have 20-some tribes now that were members at the time. And we were talking about how do we really begin to talk better to governors in the state, mainly around water rights to begin with, but mineral rights as well, and also to the business sector. You know, how can we do business? Because that was the beginning of Indian self-determination. And tribes are beginning to say, we don't need the BIA anymore, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We need to do it ourselves. How do we do that? And that's how they empowered CERT on minerals. But they wanted to expand and really make their own decisions for their own tribes. And so we started a long-term Indian Business Roundtable discussion, which led to a spin-off on Indian water rights and other associations that really put Keystone on a new track. At the time, you know, they were dealing with nuclear non-proliferation issues, nuclear waste issues. Mm-hmm. But when we got involved in this, it opened a whole big new door, and actually opened the door to the energy program that Keystone later became so well known for.
You know, it's interesting because we're having a lot of those nuclear waste conversations, and even still today at the meeting we had just today. What an interesting time. Keystone Policy Center launched in 1975. You come on the map with relationship with Bob Craig.
Summer of '78.
Summer '78, which 1978 under the Nixon administration signed the Indian Self-Determination Act, right?
And
all this
Nixon
was going on
signed
at the
it
time.
in '72.
Oh, okay.
And it took a few years for it to take force, but CERT was the first expression of it. And let me just talk to you about CERT for just a second.
Yeah.
When I was at the Federal Energy Administration, which is the forerunner to the Department of Energy, I went on a trip to Polson, Montana. And my job was to talk to disenfranchised groups about the impact of rising energy prices on their people. So they sent me out to talk to Indian tribes about that, and also water rights, which was bumping into the Project Independence, which was a blueprint for energy independence. I came back and wrote a memo to my boss, and I said, you know, these tribes, they're not only consumers of energy, they own energy. They own half the coal, or half the uranium, a third of the coal, and at least 10 to 20% of the natural gas in this country. Thus began a task force bringing 22 tribes together, much to the consternation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who didn't like us meeting with them, without them. And at some point in the course of these meetings, the tribes had lunch without us. I was called Ed the Fed in those days. Without Ed the Fed, they had lunch, and they came back from lunch to the task force meeting and said, we've just created a group called the Council of Energy Resource Tribes. We appreciate what you've done. We'll take it from here, and we need you to help fund it. And that's how that got started.
Wow. Well, as somebody who grew up with learning about Council of Energy Resource Tribes, as you know, my father, former chairman of the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, Ernest House Jr., we still have our plaque, our CERT founder plaque, standing still today in our tribal chambers back home in Toyoak, Colorado.
Your father was one of the founders and one of the great Indian leaders of my time when I was really involved with the tribes, and he gave us a lot of good advice, and most of all, he was a great friend to CERT and to the other tribes. It was kind of unusual for tribes to come together. A lot of them wanted to do what they wanted to do alone, or they had their deals with BIA or the state. These guys all came together with one purpose, and that is we're taking control of our own well-being and our futures. And that was really exciting. And I think Keystone really helped nurture that process along.
I'm glad that you say that and spend time on CERT, because I don't think a lot of people know the relationship between CERT and the partnership and collaboration with Keystone and all that, and then obviously your involvement. And one of somebody who we both know, who you know very well, good friend of yours, Peter McDonald. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that relationship, not just Ute Mountain, but other tribes that were founding members of CERT?
Well, you know, he was the engine behind the idea. He was, you know, bigger than life in those days. But he joined with Ernest House and a number of other tribes. I won't go into all of them. And they formed an executive committee of founders. And your father was part of that executive committee. And then it expanded from there. You know, Peter McDonald, who's living till this day, the last living Navajo code talker, was a great inspiration. And nothing was ever good enough for Pete. It was a strict taskmaster, and he really made CERT go to a new level. And I think to the pride of the board, which was the 22 tribes. And I'll never forget one of the chairmen saying they were so happy that we had our main operation in Denver. And they said, thank God, because every time we set up an operation in Washington, we all end up fighting with one another. They were of one mind, and as you can tell, the rest is history. They have taken over control of their mineral development, and whether they develop or not, and how they develop. So it was good. I should also add, though, that was the inspiration for the energy project at Keystone. So the Indian tribes gave a gift to Keystone as well. That energy project, which started in about 1985 or thereabouts, is going on till this day. One of their biggest achievements was the emissions trading credits issues that were part of the deregulation that was part of the 1992 Energy Policy Act. So now the energy project has done so many marvelous things. I'd love to see those two issues come back together, Indians and energy again, and I know you'll do it.
Well, I appreciate that, Ed. Let's fast forward to current. So as an ambassador yourself and your own work today, how has Keystone helped with that process on how you approach your work, both in the past and currently today?
Great question. Bob Craig and Keystone really taught me about non-adversarial conflict resolution, how to bring people together and find consensus, how to develop trust across the table, because in the end, without trust, you can't agree. You won't agree. You'll always be suspect or suspicious. The last 10% of getting to a deal is heavily based on trust. The Keystone process teaches you that. And you know, every ambassador should have to go through that. There was a day before my time when America was so strong and important in the world, and it is today too, but it could basically go to a foreign leader and say, it's my way or the highway because we're big and strong and you must follow us. That doesn't exist today, and in my time, I refused to work with my interlocutors that way. I said, we have to sit down across the table, develop a consensus, listen to you, learn from you, hopefully you'll learn from us, and we'll find a way forward together. Do you know that approach? I must say, in my 3.5 years in Morocco, I never got no from King Hassan or King Mohammed. Never got a no. And I attribute it to Keystone's training of this non-adversarial conflict resolution way of talking to people and building trust.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. So as you know, 2025, 50 years for Keystone Policy Center. We're having a variety of different events. Given your history with Keystone, what would you like to see not only celebrated, but then also recognized? And what do you think about Keystone in the future?
Well, Keystone is the future. What I've just described and what we just talked about is the way of the future. I'm also on the board of the United States Institute of Peace. I was appointed by President Biden, confirmed by the Senate. It's bipartisan. And it lives by non-adversarial conflict resolution around the world. We're doing these things. So I think what I'd like to see is Keystone be more recognized for its groundbreaking ideas on this process. And Bob used to say, we have to dare to fail. Dare to fail, I think, is a good way forward for Keystone. If we don't try it, if we're not out there, if we're not trying to put some heads together, we won't know if it's ripe enough for resolution or not. We have to get things to ripeness, and sometimes that takes a little bit of a challenge in daring. So that's where I would put it.
Wow. Powerful comments. Ed, anything that we missed? Anything you want to add to?
You're a powerful young man. Your father would be proud of you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.